Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today is the second day of online networking forum on Eastern Partnership. And I would like to present the following honorable speakers, which will be presenting their presentations to us and to our participants, which is Tim Bohse, Alexander Formozov, and Kaciaryna Šmacina. I hope I spelled it right. And let me pass the floor first to Tim, and I will ask to kindly, briefly introduce yourself. Where are you from? Which organization do you represent, and etc. Please, Tim, the floor is yours.
I'm a political scientist by education. I studied in Leipzig, in my hometown, and in Warsaw. Partially, I have during my studies, I focused on Central and Eastern Europe. And I worked for a longer time in Poland in a foundation for Polish-Ukrainian cooperation. Right now, I work with the Berlin-based organization DRA, focusing on human rights and conflict monitoring in Eastern Ukraine, and on supporting civil society initiatives in the government-controlled parts of Donbass.
Great, thank you. Then maybe to Kaciaryna.
Good morning. I am a Belarusian political analyst, and I specialize in Belarusian foreign policy, but also more broadly on regional security and great power relations. And besides my research, I also consulted Belarusian democratic forces for the past several years, including the team of Tikhanovskaya. And also one of my interests is the Eastern Partnership Program and Belarus participation in it. And I'm here at the kind invite of Tim.
Thank you, Shve Belarus, and then I will pass to Alexander.
Hello to everybody. My name is Alexander Formozov. I am coordinating a civic education project at DRA. So we are colleagues with Team at the moment, and I am educated in history and ethnology, and for several years I work in civil society sector in Berlin. I co-founded an NGO, and I work in the areas of civic education, urbanism, also culture, and also some other areas. But my actual work now is in civic education on the transformation period after the communism. So great to be here.
Yes, at this stage, I will pass the facilitation mode and the roles to you. You are guys now the rulers of this session, and please feel free to pass the floor to each other. And I'm also very glad and eager to hear about your presentation. And let the show begin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I will share my screen. Just a second.
Yes, we can see it.
You can see the presentation?
Yeah. Maybe
yes.
You can also enter the presentation mode.
Yeah, I'm doing the presentation mode.
Perfect.
Perfect. And I will pass the floor to Tim, who will start, or maybe in the beginning, just a few words. So we will discuss the Eastern Partnership, its crises, conflicts, and other challenges. And here is our short agenda. So we will cover these topics, and together with Tim and Kaciaryna, and then we will have half an hour for the discussion. So now I pass the floor to Tim, please.
So we would like to get with you into a discussion about the Eastern neighborhood policy that is from the side of the EU, the most important political framework of multilateral cooperation with Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Moldova, and Ukraine. We would like to start off with a general introduction about the history of the Eastern neighborhood policy, the general background, the state of affairs at the moment, the successes and problems we see. Thanks to Kaciaryna, we will have a special focus on Belarus as well. And then we have in mind that you have a lot of experience working in projects. We would like to discuss with you how you see the Eastern neighborhood policy and what civil society initiatives actually can do to make this framework more helpful and more meaningful. So I would start off with a short introduction of the general framework about the history and would then pass on to Alexander. So basically the Eastern neighborhood policy of the EU was established 12 years ago, and it is like the political framework of Eastern policy of the EU towards its neighbors in the eastern part of the continent. It's actually from the terms. There is a kind of similar terms. In one hand side, you have the term of the neighborhood, Eastern neighborhood, that is describing basically just the geographical region. The neighborhood policy describes a broader framework of EU's policy of creating like a ring of friends around the EU, not only in the east, but in the south as well. And the actually political framework is Eastern Partnership. This is what the actually term is, and it includes Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. This policy framework was established 12 years ago, and it has a prehistory that is kind of important to talk about. And it's the prehistory of Eastern enlargement of the European Union. So there were important rounds of enlargement in 2004 and 2007. Where the Visegrad states and the Baltic states, the Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and later on Romania and Bulgaria became members of the EU, members of the NATO later on. And this round of enlargement was very successful. So the Baltic states turned from former Soviet republics in leading members of the EU and NATO. The Visegrad states today have an enormous economic weight within the EU, like foreign trade of Germany, for instance, with the Visegrad states is so much bigger than like foreign trade of Germany with Russia. So the economic and political integration with the so-called new members, the new Eastern members of the EU was very successful, and that created an atmosphere starting after this enlargement round, what to do with the neighbors of Ukraine, of Belarus, of Georgia, Moldova, so the Eastern Partnership is basically a trade-off between EU members who supported membership, who support membership of Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, Belarus within the European Union, and other countries that oppose and that say that we need other tools to cooperate with the partners in the East. So the Eastern Partnership policy was created by initiative of Poland. Poland has, like, historically, traditionally, a very close relation to Ukraine, to this neighborhood. So they established an initiative together with the Swedes to create a new policy tool. They were only successful after the Russian-Georgian war. That kind of helped to get more political attention on the region and convinced more hesitant member states of the EU to be politically more active. And in 2009, we had this launch of the Eastern Partnership policy in Prague within a summit. And you have an entire tool set that shall help to improve relations with these countries and to build relationships built on common values in regard to democracy, human rights, free markets, and these activities were basically leading towards the direction of association agreements that were then successfully agreed on in 2016 and 2017, going hand in hand with this our attempts and practice of creating a free trade area with these countries, free travel, visa-free travel regime. So when we talk about the tools that exist, you have regular summits between the leaders of the Eastern Partnership countries and the EU every 2 years. You have financial support, you have this political framework of common values, common trade, political cooperation, financial support, and the participation of civil society plays quite a strong role. You have the EU Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, with national platforms that help to facilitate dialogue between the countries. Yeah. So problems is something that are related to this policy we would like to discuss with you about. I think it makes a lot of sense to have just a short view on the special case of Ukraine, because the protests in 2014, the Euromaidan started with political conflict around the association agreement that was basically a result of the Eastern Partnership policy. So this framework has an immense political impact, and what we can observe that the association agreement between Ukraine and the EU was decided on in 2017 after the annexation of Crimea and after the Russian aggression in the eastern part of the country started. And we see since then a quite strong dynamic in Ukrainian EU relations being reflected with a very strong presence and active attitude of the delegation of the EU within in Ukraine, strong relations on a political level, political economic support from the side of the EU, and I think this closer cooperation starting after 2014 is really having a quite deep impact because I think civil society contacts, expert contacts between Ukraine and EU countries have never been as intense as they have been since then. Yeah. So this is what I would like to say, and I would pass on to Alexander at this moment.
Okay, thank you, Tim. We've heard now some basic information about the evolution of the Eastern Partnership, and I would try to cover in the next 15 minutes something like the main trends. If we have a, so how has Eastern Partnership, how does it look now, and also the challenges. So let's have a look on the positive side first. So we, as Tim already mentioned, we have positive trends mainly in Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, and association agreements and free trade agreements have been made with all three countries. We have, of course, mainly also in these countries, we have some progress in legislation, some improvements in governance, in the rule of law, and in the development of democracy. On the other hand, there, as some experts admit, there is a little bit less maybe democratization than hoped for 10 years ago. But still, there are good examples, and just to give maybe one example, there had been some anti-discrimination legislation passed in Georgia recently in the last years, which was supported by the EU. We had democratic and competitive elections and progressive governments like the one in Moldova, for instance. Right now, governments pursuing anti-corruption agendas. In general, there is rapprochement with the EU, we can say, which includes free trade and free travel, of course. EU in general became a standard setter in its Eastern neighborhood. If we speak about for instance, these three countries, Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. But as you all know, this development is somewhat uneven or asymmetric, maybe we could say. So let's have a look on the challenges. I try to divide these challenges a little bit not being, I must say, I'm not an expert in Eastern Partnership in the first place, but I tried to learn a lot about it in the last few days, and I tried to divide these challenges in different groups, but it's somewhat artificial division maybe, and many things, of course, are interconnected. So we have the level of external challenges, and then internal ones concerning the Eastern Partnership countries, and the third level would be the EU level, challenges on the EU level. So first, the external challenges, and of course, we all know there are authoritarian forces around that which destabilize the Eastern Partnership countries by undemocratic policies, and this is of course Russia and Turkey, and if we speak about Russia, the Russian government sees, for instance, democratization as a potential threat to the regime, at least since the color revolutions, so-called color revolutions, I must say, since 2004. Russia also strongly undermines Euro-Atlantic integration by using internal partners, but also a lot by using disinformation and hybrid war. But internal actors are important, and I will get back to them. For instance, if we look at Georgia, then we can see that the role of internal actors, which oppose the Euro-Atlantic integration, is very important. But there is of course this disturbance from Russia, but the internal actors with some kind of neutral position towards the NATO, they are very important on the political level here. There is also Turkey, which, as we have seen in the past, also may apply pressure on neighbors in its authoritarian interests. But I'm not going to stop a lot on Turkey here. There is also another external factor, the role of China. I can't go in detail here, but it is important to remember, and as we know, China pursues its global initiatives around the globe, and it's not directed by democratic interests or the rule of law as the EU is, but only by its maybe geopolitical and economic interests. So it's
you're speaking basically about the Silk Road initiative.
Yeah, there is the Belt and Road initiative, and it also covers South Caucasus, for instance, maybe a little bit more than the let's say Northern Eastern Europe. It's an important aspect, but we can't go into detail maybe in the discussion. Also we should not forget COVID. I think all of you are aware what challenges it presents, and when I spoke to some experts before this talk, I've also heard this opinion that it is a challenge to Eastern Partnership indeed, because these personal contacts are very important, and we lack this personal contacts now. So also on the political level, it's a problem. And we will go more in detail on the case of Belarus. It's great that we have Kaciaryna with us. It's a special, let's say, special challenge, the case of Belarus. So I switch now just to the next group of challenges. Internal, what do we have on the level of Eastern Partnership countries? Yeah, I also already said, already mentioned the responsibility of internal actors. So when we speak about external disturbance, external influence or disruption, it is important not to forget that, also here I could quote expert opinions that the role of internal actors is as important as the external, or even maybe more. Yeah, so it's we could go for instance, we could look into very positive democratic developments, let's say in Georgia, but again, we see that there are actors which oppose the progressive agenda of the EU, yeah, probably you all remember the events around the Pride, which was disrupted in Tbilisi some time ago. Just to name one example. What else on the internal level? One of the challenges is, so free trade and open market is of course very good, but let's say the backside of this medal is could be and is brain drain and emigration. And very briefly, but we could also look at the example of the Central European countries, where we had a very similar development, and or it's comparable at least. And we can see that this emigration, you know, of well-educated people, but not only, also of the young strata of the population, it can pose a serious challenge to the states. And also it can influence the political level, let's say, because these people who would normally support the progressive, the liberal agenda, they just leave the country and work, invest themselves in other countries. Another challenge, which also concerns the level of Eastern Partnership countries, but also, you know, it's interconnected with the EU level, the asymmetry of the Eastern Partnership as a whole, and also some conflicting developments. So we could should remember some recent examples, as for example the uneasy relationships between Belarus and Ukraine in the last year or years. And what I mean by this asymmetry, or again what experts mean here, is that it is challenging for the EU, the fact that this area of Eastern Partnership is so diverse and we have so different developments, is a challenge for the EU, because it would rather prefer to apply kind of one policy for all, but it doesn't work this way. So so you can't apply one type of policy for so different countries as we have now in the Eastern Partnership.
Alexander, if I may ask one question, or maybe add on to the internal challenges, because I also believe that we should also include the media aspect, like the internal challenges with the media, which is often being bribed or used against the population of its countries to manipulate the decision and etc. And it is a huge mess, not only in Ukraine but also in different in other 6 countries of Eastern Partnership. And yeah, maybe just to add on, because I truly think this is one of the key internal challenges also to the Eastern Neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arthur. I think the role of media is very important, and I must say that it's not an exclusive list, but it's just some examples. So thank you very much for adding this important aspect. And but maybe we could look also on challenges on the EU level. So one of the aspects which is challenging for both the EU and the Eastern Partnership countries is the security topic. Security is a central topic for many Eastern Partnership countries. But on the other side, the European Union tends to evade it in some ways and prefers kind of soft topics like for cooperation with the Eastern Partnership, like civil society and the rule of law, let's say. So this creates some kind of asymmetry again. On the other hand, there is not enough understanding, I would say, for the specificities of the Eastern Partnership countries on the EU level, in the Commission, for example. And as I mentioned before, it is, according to many experts, it's just not working to apply one approach to all. And for instance, such issues as corruption are very difficult to tackle and should be handled very carefully and in subtle ways on the national levels. Also, experts would criticize sometimes some kind of, maybe arrogance is a too strong word, but if we could remind ourselves of this term, excellent students, which is sometimes applied towards the best among the Eastern Partnership countries. And I don't know how you how it sounds in your ears, but I think it's a bit strange term, so this attitude probably also should be changed. And last but not least, on my short list here is the lack of a common EU strategic view or strategic approach to its Eastern neighborhood. We have a very diverse views inside the EU, even inside one country. Maybe we could reflect a bit on this point in the discussion. But yeah, obviously there is no single strategic approach, and it is a challenge, it is a problem. So there are, different ideas what could be the priorities, strategic priorities of the EU. There is some hope that with the development of the EU strategic compass next year, this could change a little bit, and Eastern Neighborhood or Eastern Partnership countries could get a bigger place on the this strategic agenda. Yeah, on my next slide, I also have a short list which concerns the challenges which we spoke about right now, but it is on a more general level. And I think this level is important to remember when, for instance, when we speak about the challenges inside the EU, the disparities, the lack of single strategic view. So I think there is an underlying kind of basic big event maybe, or a layer which is important to remember. Why? So why we have these problems? Why, for instance, liberal democracy doesn't seem to be a role model any longer? It is a global challenge, but I think when we speak about Europe, many of the things are related to the post-communist transition. And basically, many people would say in some countries that this transition, is still continuing. So we have, but on the other hand, we have countries inside the EU which who became members and who many years ago would be also named maybe excellent students or similarly, but who made great progress. But then unexpectedly, for many people, they kind of turned away from the liberal agenda, as, for instance, the governments in Poland or Hungary. So many experts analyze this situation and think about it, and try to find out what are the reasons. Maybe I just briefly recur here to one book, which is some kind of enlightening in this respect. It's The Light That Failed by Ivan Krastev and Stephen Holmes, which appeared several years ago. And it precisely tries to answer this question. So what happened in Central and Eastern Europe? Why is liberalism and open society not so attractive anymore? What was the problem? Why there is this feeling in some of the societies in Central Europe of feeling second class, or this why many people would say that Westernization was a problem, or so I think that it's very important to research and to learn more, and also to educate the next generations in Europe about this transition. But before doing that, we should somehow change the public narratives on what we know and what we how we reflect on transformation or transition after 89/91 in our countries, and it should be a more open discussion without blind spots, and we need more voices in it, and to make, you know, groups not feeling excluded from this narrative. So I think this is also an important aspect. I now would like to give the floor to Kaciaryna with the case of Belarus.
I also saw that Artur raised the hand. Maybe you wanted to comment something?
Yeah,
sorry.
I believe this will make sense after you finish the presentation. So I wanted to ask like several questions for the discussion already. So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so speaking of Belarus, it's a very peculiar case, like Belarus participation in the Eastern Partnership, given that at the time when the program was designed and Poland and Sweden were pushing towards this program, Belarus was already isolated and experienced sort of sanctions and isolation, which started from in the 90s, where, let's say in 1995, where like Lukashenko conducted unconstitutional referendums, started to consolidate powers. And then at that time, EU and Belarus negotiated the new partnership and cooperation agreement, which was never signed. And by this day, we have like as a basis for legal cooperation, we have this agreement that comes from Soviet times, which were signed between USSR and like European side in 1989, and Belarus sort of became the successor of that legal agreement. And even in 2006, for instance, there was a non-paper issued by European Commission, which declared that that EU cuts the official contacts with the official Minsk due to, again, multiple human rights violations and crackdown on the opposition, and EU pursues the sort of the critical engagement strategy with the Belarusian civil society. And I'm pointing this out because this is something that could be relevant as we speak. As you might have heard that several months ago, Belarusian MFA declared that they suspend their participation in the Eastern Partnership program. But I'll touch on this a little bit later. And so again, the whole history of Belarus participation in the Eastern Partnership program is a story of like Belarusian like Belarus being an outlier in this whole program, and then the whole story is about the distancing and rapprochement cycles. And again, at the time the program was designed, there was a question whether the European side wanted to include Belarus in the EAP program at all. And then the decision actually to include Belarus in this program was yet another attempt to reset the relations with, again, like the authoritarian Minsk, which was under sanctions and isolation. And then, of course, like this decision was welcomed by the official Minsk at the time of its inception. But then in 2010, we had yet another presidential elections with there was yet another crackdown in opposition, around 700 people arrested overnight. And then like several presidential candidates were put in prison and then released gradually after a while. So like that's sort of the normal course of events in Belarus. And then again, over the time of existence of the or like Belarus membership in this program, the official Minsk usually emphasized that they do not seek political integration with EU, and they rather want to benefit or to develop mutually beneficial economic ties with EU, also through the mechanisms of Eastern Partnership program. And here I would point out that Belarus did benefit from the technocratic democratic assistance programs, and then depending on sort of like political developments, there were times when, let's say, the European Investment Bank did not work with Belarus, again, as one of the points of pressure on the Belarusian regime. But in 2017, EIB launched their cooperation with Belarus till, again, recent times, till 2020 happened, when they all, again, like EBRD, EIB had to stop their cooperation with Belarus. And then over, I think like the most interesting period is the time of the so-called normalization of Belarus relations with the West, with EU included and within the Eastern Partnership program included, which started after sort of Belarusian leadership tried to show the constructive position in relations with the West, and tried to sell this idea that they are the donors of regional stability. And after the Ukrainian crisis, and in the, or more pragmatically speaking, in the West eyes, Lukashenko did not seem that much of a problem compared to other challenges in the region. And that, again, like that was the most, I think, interesting time to study, because it gives some lessons sort of for the future. And so what EU did, also including in the Eastern Partnership framework, was they tried to pursue the or to emphasize the areas of common understanding, where there was essentially like trying to pursue the technocratic democratic assistance programs, also some like cross-border cooperation programs. And essentially it led to the point, it was like very interesting to observe how the like European bureaucrats would travel to Minsk or talk about Belarus' role in the Eastern Partnership. And at the time of celebrating 10 years of the Eastern Partnership program in 2019, the normalization reached the point when European bureaucrats and Lukashenko and Belarusian Ministry of Foreign Affairs would say that, oh, our dialogue is at its high, like unprecedented, like high level. And at that time, even Lukashenko was saying that, oh, we would be happy to host the EAP summit in Minsk, which never happened. But if it did, like that would be the first of its kind, which is conducted outside the EU and rather in the in the Eastern Partnership member states. But I would also emphasize that in the previous years, there was not a single time when, let's say, Lukashenko attended the Eastern Partnership summits. There were times when, again, due to the sanctions and to the tensions and the human rights violations, Belarus was the scapegoat and the elephant in the room. And then like there were times when Belarusian side was not invited to the summits, but also there were times when, let's say, Lukashenko could have visited, but then the minister, like Foreign Minister McKay, would rather travel. And also there were, again, interesting times when the diplomats would formally invite Lukashenko, but then informally say that, oh, but we really won't be happy to see him. Like, could you consider sending someone else instead? And again, that was an interesting time to observe during the normalization times, how the EU thought that the technocratic democratic assistance could be a successful sort of choice of cooperation with Belarus. There were some, besides the, let's say, like EAB or EBRD lending money for the infrastructure projects, there were also like technical expertise, like best practices exchanges programs, where, let's say, the employees of the Belarusian National Bank would travel to Poland or Germany to learn the best practices, and also to maybe elaborate some strategies for Belarusian like macroeconomic stability. And that was the calculation maybe on the EU side that, okay, Belarus clearly does not want to pursue the political dialogue or like on politically sensitive subjects, but maybe we could invest sort of or support the long-term Belarus democratic, maybe like not a democratic change, but somehow like through those like technical assistance programs, we could contribute into Belarus resilience and long-term stability. And indeed, I would say that the money that Belarus got for infrastructure projects, for instance, or through like EIB, for instance, or there were some projects supported by EU and World Bank jointly, where I think like the World Bank would give I don't remember, like essentially there was like a cooperation between like either ideational support was coming, I think, from World Bank specialists, but then with some funding from EU side against support of some sort of infrastructure projects for Belarus. What was interesting about those projects is that Belarus had a choice then. If they were looking for lending for some major projects, they had a choice whether to get it from EU with some conditionality and also maybe some quality, the sort of the due diligence of the projects, and also some conditionality versus otherwise seeking money from the Eurasia, like the similar similar banks, let's say like the Russia or China-led development banks. And then all this progress was swept away after what happened in Belarus in 2020. But I would also point out that like how the civil society existed in all those years, it also depended very much on the political climate. And there was this like one of the instruments that I think like my colleagues mentioned earlier today was the Civil Society Forum, and that's also an interesting tool. And it was interesting to observe the participation of civil society in this Eastern Partnership platform. I mean, on the Belarusian side, when there were this I think annual meetings of the, let's say, EU bureaucrats and the Belarusian authorities, and also one of the, there was like this dialogue, Belarus civil society human rights dialogue, and essentially like the Belarusian side needed to pretend in front of the Western partners and to include the Belarusian like civil society into this dialogue. And of course, it was very formal conversation when the civil society realizes they are only included to look good, essentially to report some progress, that there is some dialogue happening, but otherwise they won't be able to sit at the same table with the like Belarusian authorities at all, because like for very obvious reasons, the Belarusian authorities would prefer to have like gongos at the table. And that was also an interesting case when at the time of celebration of the 10 years of the partnership program in Brussels, there were of course like Belarusian NGOs invited to this event, and only there and that was sort of like a scandal and a civil advocacy campaign in Belarus for the law that would protect from domestic violence. And there was a lot of discussions in Belarusian society, which led to the point when the law was rejected by president, but it was prepared in much details by the Ministry of Interior, etc. So, and what I'm trying to say here is that domestically there was no room for discussions, and of course you can try to campaign as much as you want or try to reach out the decision makers at, I don't know, like local authorities or ministries, but they would ignore you if this request comes from the like civil society. But at this forum in Brussels, one of the activists who was campaigning for this law, she was able to address the foreign minister Mackay at this forum, and then he had no other choice but to react like properly and to say like, oh, we will address this issue like once we get back to Minsk. And at that time, like Minister of Foreign Affairs Mackay had to sort of follow up on this conversation and to make at least some minor gestures that he takes this question into consideration. Also, there were times when in 2017, when there were like some protests against some law on like sort of the unemployment tax the Belarusian authorities were trying to introduce, the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum sent a monitoring mission to Belarus, or they sort of organized this monitoring mission to see how the human rights are respected at that time. And then, of course, as we speak, like as the repressions continue today in the current political crisis, all this progress was swept away. And it's a good question how we would proceed further. And here I would just make the short note that this decision of the official Minsk now to say that, oh, now we suspend our participation in Eastern Partnership, it sounds to me as one of the desperate gestures and one of the few reciprocity sort of gestures that the official Minsk could do now to react to EU sanctions and to react to the isolation that comes from the West, in the sense that if Belarus, and I think like the Belarusian side announced that they would introduce some sanctions against the EU, but of course, like that won't be sensitive for Brussels at all. And again, like it's a good question: who loses most from not being able to use the mechanisms of Eastern Partnership? Like, is it the Belarusian side, which might be seeking for some, again, like money for infrastructure projects, or other ways for, I don't know, like enhancing ties for like trade cooperation, or is it to you? Like, will EU notice that the official Minsk paused its cooperation? And then there was another thing that right after, I think like in 2020, the sides were also negotiating the partnership priorities. I mean, EU and Belarus, and among other things, there were agreement on decreasing the prices for the visas, which of course could be well, quite noticeable by regular people, but also there was an agreement on readmission of sort of migrants, which came as a side agreement besides this visa facilitation agreement. And what is important now is that when Belarus suspended its participation in the partnership program, they also decided to sort of pause the application of readmission agreements, which also you might have heard about the migration crisis on the border, which is orchestrated and created artificially by sort of the Belarusian authorities at the Lithuanian and Polish border. And that was, again, like one of interesting ways to sort of to fight with the EU via legal means, and also this like artificial migration crisis. And it's a good question, and like an open question with no clear answer what the EU could do, and how like the what happens with like Belarus in this Eastern Partnership program in the future. I would maybe say that, of course, this would depend on the political developments, like how the current Belarusian crisis resolves. And I think we are now at the stalemate when Lukashenko managed to preserve his grip on power. And on the EU side now, there is quite a lot of willingness to support the Belarusian democratic forces, the Tikhanovskaya team, for instance, and the moment when the official Minsk said that they don't want to participate in the EAP program, then the EU side announced that they would further support the sort of the democratic opposition and continue to work with the civil society. But then there is a great question, how do you work with the civil society at the moment when the majority of the civil society organizations were liquidated by Belarusian authorities, and the number of political prisoners, who many of whom are civil society activists, like grows as we speak, and many had to relocate outside the country. And then the ways, and also not only due to COVID, but also due to Belarusian restrictions on crossing the border, like the ability to cross the border and like to travel, especially for like civil society activists, is very limited. So, and of course, like how you get the money, let's say like those like foreign grants, and how you manage to legally operate inside Belarus. Again, like it's a huge challenge. I only know that, let's say, the democratic forces and the like solidarity funds, which again support the Belarusian opposition abroad, they do have some connections with how they support, let's say, like the victims of repressions in Belarus, and they have some ways of channeling those money for the media or those like civil society initiatives that still survive in Belarus. But then again, I think like now civil society in Belarus is just, it's not dead, but like it's going, like those who managed to survive and those who are not in prison today, they are rather going underground and becoming as invisible as possible. And I would also emphasize that now the repressions touch not only on the some political initiatives or human rights initiatives, but also the women's rights organizations, or let alone, I don't know, even the bird watchers NGO came under repressions. So again, it's hard to predict things. And maybe I would just add one caveat is that, or one concern is that if we are now at this stalemate when Lukashenko still manages to stay in power, and then it seems like the political elites back him up, and also obviously Russia backs up the authoritarian regime in Belarus, what if EU loses interest eventually, or if they see there's no evidence of change coming? What if they decide to go to yet another round of normalization and sort of again try to renegotiate relations with authoritarian regime, as we've seen it essentially in the past 26 years? I think that's the danger for Belarus, and I really hope this won't happen. But at the same time, again, having worked with some democratic forces and having seen how some European countries tend to support rhetorically and maybe to act in a symbolic way to support the Belarusian protest, but at the same time they would consider maybe sending their ambassadors to Belarus, saying that we support your protest, but we think we have to think ahead, and therefore we again think about reestablishing those ties with the official Minsk. So I really hope that we won't get to that point and somehow the system would dissolve, but at this time we are at the stalemate. And then coming back to the Eastern Partnership program, I think, well, there is no simple decision for Belarus, but I think we can certainly learn a lot from the case of Belarus participation in the Eastern Partnership and how it evolved around the, again, eternal distancing, rapprochement, sanctions, avoiding the political sensitive subjects, supporting the civil society again, as it was happening in 2006 with this non-paper from the European Commission, and then emphasizing some technocratic democratic assistance, hoping that it would help somehow to maybe democratize or contribute towards resilience inside the country, then getting disappointed because you would see that all those promises that were coming from Ministry, let's say, of Foreign Affairs, or for those Belarusian reformators or liberal-minded bureaucrats inside the system, it was all swiped away, and now we're back to square one. I don't want to sound very pessimistic, but here is where things are today, in my point of view.
Yes, Rina, many thanks. I just raised the hand to already proceed to the discussion because we are already running out of time. Yes, many thanks for this overview about the situation in Belarus. I wanted to ask questions regarding your country first and then refer to the Eastern Partnership. Everything that you have mentioned with the persecution of human rights activists, and not only, I have also many examples from my friends from Belarus who are forced to leave the country and etc. And as you have mentioned regarding this ambassador's move from the EU, I just get this understanding that for me it sounds like very similar if the EU would like to establish contacts to Taliban, because it doesn't really make sense for me subjectively. And what Eastern Partnership countries themselves can do to help the Belarus to keep at least those horizontal ties is to also to keep the connection to those who see the democratic development, who would like to live in a democratic country, not in a under authoritarian regime. And I cannot speak only about my own capacities and maybe my organization's capacity, but we would definitely like to support in the way that we could also host some people as volunteers and the organization. And this can easily be done in other Eastern Partnership countries. And there are also programs which I know about for the students, specifically coming from Belarus at the European institutions, so they get scholarship and etc. And at this point, yeah, my question would be, what Eastern Partnership countries themselves, apart from the EU, can do to help each other? Because, I mean, we are in the European neighborhood countries. And the whole situation about the security of the Europe, the security of this region lies in my opinion, in Eastern Partnership countries. If we look at 6 countries which we have, Ukraine, so almost each country has some kind of either military or other political conflicts. Belarus, Russia involved. Ukraine, annexation of Crimea, Eastern Partnership countries, military hybrid war, etc., Russia involved. Azerbaijan, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, Russia and Turkey involved. And if we go to Moldova, Transnistria, Russia involved. Russia doesn't foresees, this is my subjective opinion, foresees all these countries as its backyard. And the biggest problem maybe for me is that EU tries to deal with Russia. It's like to cope with Russia, but it doesn't want to from the Russian perspective, because it is at the backyard and it wants to restore maybe some kind of Soviet Union 2.0. So my point in question is, if the EU wants to, to build a safe space, a secure space at the neighborhood to help the democratic movements and etc., maybe it should also target the help for the civil society at first hand, because these are the people who are interested, these are the organizations who are interested in pushing that agenda onto the level to help them to establish those contacts. But if there are already countries under authoritarian regime, this might be very challenging. And the whole also concept of the association agreements, which is quite nice, and Ukraine has the biggest, largest association agreement with the EU ever signed. But the real Euro integration happens at place, like at local cities and etc. So I would basically wanted to have more programs on the democratic values, on the human rights values happening in the Eastern Partnership countries, and maybe to push the economic development between our 6 Eastern Partnership countries. Like since recent, there was a recent conference in Batumi where Volodymyr Zelensky, our president, also expressed his disappointment in the whole concept of Eastern Partnership. So it's geopolitical views and etc. It does not fulfill its aims and etc. So we need to some kind of create a new form of Eastern Partnership 2.0. And he basically has the point. And maybe the point will be also to support those countries who share the democratic values and to build the strong economic relations with such countries. So then it also helps us to improve our economy. And then so once we are on our track to the European integration, so we are not asking the EU, so please take us as the European Union member, but we will be offered to become European Union member because we have a stronger economy, we have stronger democracy, we have a strong rule of law, and etc. So this is my comments, and maybe this is some type for the discussion which you might also raise. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we could add here the question which correlates very much what I think with what Artur just mentioned. This is what we thought also could be a relevant question for the discussion.
I can read it aloud for those who might not see it. How could civil society contribute to making the Eastern Partnership successful? If any of you would like to speak, please unmute yourself and feel free to share your ideas and comments.
I would perhaps step up and reflect a bit on what you have said already. You didn't mention also Georgia when it comes to the problematic territories, right? So this is one more important point. The another one, I assume that when Alexander was mentioning about one of the challenges, and that one of the challenges is a lack of understanding within European Union also regarding Eastern Partnership format, for instance, that might be crucial in the context that we are talking about, because EU neighborhood policy is not only about the East, right? It's also about the South, and like overall, it includes 16 countries, as far as I remember, right? So this EU neighbors South and EU neighbors East. And there is perhaps a need also on the EU level, not first of all, but I would say that it's quite important also to reshape or rethink the concept of the policies that they are trying to promote within the countries, within the neighborhood countries. And on that occasion, there might be drawn already some lessons, I would say, or some patterns, how civil society, for instance, from EU could be contributing towards the civil society of the neighborhood countries. And I mean, for instance, like the event that we are running right now, right, the Eastern Partnership Forum for Networking, I assume that this is also like a format in order to enhance the understanding and cooperation, first of all, between our 6 countries, but also that might be done in terms of Eastern Partnership and EU countries, for instance. And another thing that just came to my mind that, for instance, also there might be an interesting point to try to establish cooperation between the countries of the Eastern Partnership, right, and between the countries of the South, I mean the EU neighbors South. And as we have, for instance, the format of Guam, like Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Moldova, right? So why not to try to emerge the collaboration between, for instance, Ukraine, Georgia, Tunisia, and Jordan, and to initiate, I don't know, like some certain number of issues that might be developed like within this format. And on this occasion also to promote cooperation between the, let's say, East and between the South. Mm-hmm. And EU perhaps would be also interested on that occasion, that countries also trying to, how shall I put it, to collaborate between themselves without actually involvement of EU over that much. So that might be another a point to think about, right, and to reflect.
Dmitry, I guess you made a nice point, but for the external policy of the European Union, but not for the external policy, maybe for the Eastern Partnership countries. So, because if we foresee like this type of cooperation with Tunisia, etc., if the Eastern Partnership countries like issues and challenges would be included, this might also make a good point. But yeah, I'm also thinking like how to better help the countries, like 6 countries within the Eastern Partnership countries. And if we think about the civil society, which can contribute to that, I would stick to the simple mobility exchanges, because this what actually makes the difference. On the case of Ukraine, if you have ever had any inter-regional exchange with people, for example, from Lviv and Kharkiv, from Odessa and Kiev, and etc., this enlarged, this brings you social cohesion, and this builds really strong ties. Erasmus Plus is a perfect example of that. So why don't we have the Eastern Partnership Exchange Program like its own exchange program? Because in the whole scope, and all of the countries of the Eastern Partnership countries have some kind of conflicts, and we are also speaking about the peace building and like building trust between the citizens. And at least building a connection with people from different backgrounds, with different circumstances, from conflict regions and etc., by organizing such an exchange events can lead to at least simple understanding that sometimes people are not just like wanted that situation and they just became hostages of the circumstances. And once people understand this, they already feel some kind of understanding to the problems of other people, other countries. And I personally believe, so once we have such kind of understanding, those people, and I would actually tackle and target the young people to have such exchanges, when they grow up, they become the part of the business or the government officials or civil society or etc. They might be less eager to launch another military aggression. They might be less eager to start a war. They might be less eager, I don't know, to use authoritarian regime. They might be more into the democratic discussion. They might be more for dialogue. And this, for me, would be already a good case. This would be already a success if people just at least keep the things as they are while improving, slowly but improving, but not studying another war, not studying another shooting, not shelling the buildings of the residents of each or another country. So I would stick to the youth exchange as my recommendation for the civil society, which can be contributed to the whole situation of the Eastern Partnership. Maybe you have other discussion, or we can start a debate at my point. That's totally okay, because we're in a free democratic country.
If I may, I would like to react also to what Dmytro said. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea, actually, as I understood, to promote this context and cooperation between the South and the East, let's put it, on the civil society level. So I thought about this level particularly, and I think it would be actually very interesting, and it very much also resonates with what I'm saying. I am thinking about the transition issues and the we could call it post-totalitarian transformation, because yeah, you know, this transformation happened in post-Soviet or post-socialist countries, and some years ago we have seen the Arab Spring, and another wave of you know, well, many hoped for democratization, and it happened also in some cases. So post-authoritarian changes in the Mediterranean. And there was very little connections, you know, and mutual interest or mutual learning, which I think could be very, very useful. And I think this context, it could be one of the topics, you know, to discuss together, for instance, these post-totalitarian changes. And I think there are much more, actually. So I would be, I think it's a wonderful idea. Just wanted to comment. Personally, I would be also very interested to hear more from the audience, from those who were not involved yet. Maybe some of you. Oh yeah, great. It was the raised hand.
Yeah, thank you for the possibility to share my point. And personally, it's quite similar with Arthur's point, because to my mind, it's extra important to concentrate on youth and on developing of youth society of Eastern Partnership, because now, for example, we have no much influence on the current situation globally, and especially even if we take the case of Belarus, they have the youth divided into two camps, like more democratic, and it is more divided to like totalitarian regime Lukashenko, right? But growing up like unit use in 10, 20, 30 years, our generation will become like will take place of those who are now getting these decisions, and we will understand and make our own points and share it to the society. So we will take this influence and get a possibility to change the situation like that.
Many things, Igor. Maybe also some comments or topics that you wanted to bring to the question, or maybe you have your own. We will be happy also to discuss it. Then if there are no questions from your side, I might only ask like maybe some existential question, like what is the possible future of the Eastern Partnership, which is a very hard one, I would say, and we can also think about decades and etc. But as we look at it as it now, it seems to me like some kind of divided. We have different like groups within the Eastern Partnership. It is quite obvious that we have the group of Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. We have like the countries also some kind of divided, and it was also some kind of a surprise for me, because I had a recent friend from Germany who have been visiting some kind of exchange program in Azerbaijan, in Baku, and I get to know that if once you are in Azerbaijan, you cannot enter Armenia, and vice versa. So these type of conflicts and problems already have between the rest two countries, and then we go to Belarus, which officially, like those government officials who claim to have the results of some kind of official elections happened, stated that they want to get out of the Eastern Partnership. So it seems like it's falling apart, and this is not a positive note of this whole networking forum, and the whole aim of why we and as Drukarnia wanted to bring this issue, because we wanted to speak freely on everything which is happening right now, and the aim, apart from three objectives that we have, like to speak about the youth participation, to bring the issue about the fakes and disinformation campaigns and ecological aspects and initiatives, was to actually build those horizontal ties. Because even if the official cooperation on the ambassadors level fail, there will be still horizontal civil society, NGOs, business connections, which will contribute to the economic and political also development, democratic development of each countries. So I don't know, my maybe question to Tim and maybe also to Alexander, to ask, what do you think from, like, I don't know, Germany's European Union perspective? What do you think where the Eastern Partnership going, and what is the actual future of it? Yeah, thank you.
This is a big question. Also regarding our schedule. I don't know if we could give a good answer, but
yeah, I understand. We'll make a short pause after.
Maybe we should do another panel on this on this question.
Yeah.
But no, to be honest, I think it's very difficult. I would be grateful if Tim could add maybe on the German perspective, or Kaciaryna maybe also, for her expert view. I think so. We try to mention some of the future issues, and you mentioned too several times, like the issue of security, for instance, of secure space for Eastern Partnership countries and for their societies, actually, for the civil societies. This is so here we need to have actually a broader discussion, I think, inside the EU and the EU countries, and you know, bring the issues of Eastern Partnership countries more into light. Maybe so my feeling is that EU countries, the Union, but also the particular societies should have a bigger feeling of responsibility for the Eastern neighborhood. And I also think that it should be a priority in the future for the EU, a strategic priority. I mentioned briefly the EU strategic compass, which is an interesting, you know, political initiative on this strategic and foreign policy agenda of the EU. It should be the idea behind it is that this is a basic kind of strategic paper which defines which should define, it's a document basically which should be prepared in 22, and it should define the future peace and defense policy or some areas, so some priorities. So for instance, what threats are there, with which partners EU should act in the future, which means technologies, which areas like cyberspace or space, and according to that strategic compass, the future investments should be made in certain areas, you know. And it would be, for instance, very important that Eastern Partnership countries and the Eastern neighborhood would be prioritized in this paper next year, 22, as I said. And here I see also a role for, of course, for think tanks, but also for civil society, which could bring, you know, not the civil society of EU and in Eastern Partnership countries, which should bring these issues more into light. So maybe just one point.
That's actually a good point. And I maybe then wanted also to encourage the participants, because you're already privileged, because you already know the English language, so you can take part in the decision and discussions, not only in the Eastern Partnership countries level, but also at the EU level, to bring your ideas, to bring the changes that needs to be done. So yeah, at this point, I wanted to thank Alexander, team, and Kaciaryna